Hey everybody, this is Mike Legeros at Legeros Fireline. We have something special today. We're doing our very first interview, podcast style interview with my friend, my longtime friend, Jeffrey Hammerstein. He's a retired paramedic and a longtime paramedic, and before that, a volunteer EMT, going all the way back to 1985 when he started volunteering at Garner Rescue Squad, or as we're going to call it, Garner Rescue here in Wake County, North Carolina. He was a volunteer from 1985 to 1990, and he began working full-time at Wake County EMS as a paramedic in 1988, where he rose through the ranks from paramedic to field training officer to district chief, then with additional duties as PIO or public information officer and community outreach role. And then in 2014, promoted to a newly created position of assistant chief for community outreach, which also included the role of PIO. And he retired in 2021. Then he became an author. He wrote a book, his very first book, which we're going to talk about today. It's called Hi, I'm a Paramedic, How a Timid Soul Found Purpose. The author, Jeffrey S. Hammerstein. It's available on Amazon. It's self-published. So let's begin. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate you having me on and looking forward to talking about things.
Well, let's start with the simplest question there is. What made you want to be a paramedic?
Very, very good question. It ties as much as anything back for people in my generation to the television show Emergency. Watching it every Saturday night, not in syndication, but as they came out, each edition new on Saturday night. Watching that, and I was close to a road where a lot of ambulances pass by, so lots of little kids are intrigued by the lights and sirens, and certainly I was too. And then kind of incorporating that, there was something about me that was very timid and shy and a sheepish little kid that needed a lot of reassurance from adults on anything that was frightening. And as I watched Emergency, watching those guys respond to the scene and bringing in a medical kit and a heart monitor and coming into somebody's living room and coming across people who were scared and frightened and unsure. And these guys came in, Johnny and Roy, they came in and they took over the situation and they made them feel safe. They made them better. And at some level of my young 7-year-old, 8-year-old consciousness, I could sense that and started to drive myself towards one day I want to be that person. I'm so timid. I need so much reassurance. One day I want to grow up and be the person that provides that for other people who are scared and frightened and unsure. And it all kind of, those three things came together. Emergency, that feeling of sheepishness, and then seeing those real ambulances pass by my house and thinking, that's it. That's how to make this thing happen. And that's the direction I took, and I never looked back, right up until 2021 when I retired.
So let's set the stage. Where are you watching those episodes of Emergency, and how do you get from there, which spoiler is in Indiana, and how do you get to Raleigh, North Carolina, and then from Raleigh, how do you find yourself at Garner Rescue?
Sure. So I grew up at 756 South Rotherwood Avenue in Evansville, a block from Belmead Avenue, Evansville, Indiana, as you said. That's where we were watching. It was Belmead, just a block away, where the ambulances were passing by so frequently, to St. Mary's Hospital just down the road, and kind of seeing all these things come together. And that's where I decided I was going to be that paramedic. Well, come to find out, when I was 16 years old, my parents decided that they were going to move the family to Raleigh, North Carolina. So we moved there. It was at the time North Haven Apartments on Sandy Forks Road. I'm sure a lot of people may remember those. But we were there for a while getting situated, and I was learning about EMS around the area. I was a little distraught about being moved. At 16 is a difficult time to move to another part of the country, and so I was pretty homesick. So I knew I was going to be a paramedic. My mother helped me find my way into an EMT class at Wake Tech, which was got me focused on actually doing something about my EMS career and not necessarily the other alternative career for me, which is going to be a famous rock star. Still working on that. But it was in the EMT class. It was in the Allied Health Facility on Wake Med's campus, or Wake Medical Center at the time. And in that class, while we're working on the practical station, splinting, backboarding, putting the oxygen regulator on, there was a guy in class named Russ Austin, and he was a member of Garner Rescue Squad, Garner Volunteer Rescue Squad. And he just piped up one day and said, "Hey, anybody wants to come to the rescue station on this coming Saturday? We can all practice. Whoever wants to come, we can practice these skills." And so I came up and I showed up at St. Mary's, at Garner St. Mary's, and I never looked back. I thought this is the place for me.
And you heard from your brother that the ambulances here are green, but that's not the case with Garner Rescue.
Well, that's right. So when I got a report from my brother, he knew the important things to tell me. What do the police cars look like? What do the ambulances look like? He said they were green, and I questioned that, and he said, "Well, the stripe is green." So we all know that turns out to be Wake County EMS. But in EMT class, before I was with anybody, with any agency, a gentleman named Russ Austin was there who volunteered at Garner Rescue Squad and offered for people to come out and work on the hands-on skills that we were going to be tested on soon at the state level. So I showed up at Garner St. Mary's Volunteer Rescue Squad in Garner, North Carolina, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, this is the place for me, because it was this grand station looking out over this intersection, and the bay doors were open, and all four of the vehicles in there were orange and white ambulance EMS related vehicles. It wasn't the back end of a fire station somewhere. I was going to be a paramedic. I wasn't going to be a firefighter. No, I don't mean anything the least bit off about that to all of my firefighter friends, but I was focused on being a paramedic on an ambulance, and I never looked back from that station.
So, for our visiting listeners, Garner is the town right next to Raleigh, south of Raleigh, Raleigh, the capital city here in Wake County. And in our area here, pretty much, I think statewide, we do not do a lot of fire-based EMS. So back then, and it's kind of true today, the EMS services are either independent community rescue squads or they are a function of a county government. There are a few municipal EMS agencies, some bundled with fire services. That sets that stage. So continue the story.
Well, so from there, that was my foot in the door in EMS. So I became certified not terribly long after that. I came and I filled out an application to volunteer, and then I started responding to calls. It was that very first call, November of 1985, that I remember so vividly, because for all these years now, I was determined to be a paramedic. And that moment with that first dispatch and responding to that call, there was so much nervous energy that after all these years, I'm making this thing happen. And I think that's why I remember the details of that call so crystal clear, which is ultimately that call itself is what really led to writing this book in a lot of ways. But that was the foot in the door, and from there, getting experience, knowing I was going to be a full-time career paramedic, Wake County EMS was the place to do that. Garner was a smaller volunteer agency, not so much a career place, but that got me the experience to be a valid applicant for Wake County EMS in 1988.
So, folks, Jeff and I have worked together. I'd have to look at, but I mean, 10 years, maybe more. He knows how I think, and we now have an opportunity to go in a couple different directions. I could ask him about that first call that made an impression or those early years. But folks, you can go read the book. So we're going to jump back and forth with his biography, but I want to go at a higher level a bit and ask you, Jeff, he's right here. So what drove you to want to write this book? And more importantly, what have people thought? How has the response been?
So I always say, to start with, the simple answer for what drove me to write this book is that my wife Letitia told me to. And I said, yes, ma'am, and I got on it. But it was I was close to retirement, nostalgic, thinking about everything I've done, where I've been, and just discussing that, telling her about that call in detail. It was on a long car ride, and all this detail of everything that happened. And she said, "You're going to write a book." That's what you're going to do. And so I started in on it. I never set out to write about my career in EMS, but I've done a lot of writing for EMS, a lot of professional writing for EMS. I've got writers in my family. It's just kind of in our blood. So I did as she told me, and I sat down and just started writing the story and went from there and spent it was about a 3.5 year run to put this thing together. It published on August 1st, 2025. When it went out, I mean, that is a vulnerable feeling because I've written all these words, very, very personal and transparent and vulnerable, including a lot of weaknesses, fears, concerns, distresses, that go along with anybody who responds to 911 calls, the things we see and do and face. Doesn't matter whether you're a paramedic or not, doesn't matter what role you're playing. So that went out. I was nervous about that vulnerability. I was nervous about whether this book was readable, whether it flowed. And then I was very pleasantly humbled with the response I got. I was overwhelmed with the response I got. People who had been in the business a long time, number one, very kindly saying how readable it was and they couldn't put it down, and those kinds of things that anybody would want to hear. But more importantly, much more importantly, uh, a lot of the feedback came from a wellness perspective, helping them, for example, saying I was able to articulate things that they haven't been able to and things that they've wrestled with for 30 years. Another person said that she got a copy of the book for her therapist so that her therapist could better understand who she was. So the response, as you're saying, how was it? It was in that it helped articulate who we are as emergency responders, what we face, and the challenges we work through, and helps people better understand us.
So that's interesting. In my role as a public safety photographer, I have heard from the responder community, notably a lot of people in EMS who've said, Mike, your pictures have helped my family get to see what I do and understand what I do. And, and for our listeners, when I say I'm a public safety photographer, I'm going to fires, I'm going to medical calls, and I basically am there to be a photojournalist, but also to spotlight what responders are doing. And that means such techniques as always shooting pictures from behind a patient. So
Mhm.
patient confidentiality is preserved. And I've heard the same thing from fire people. A chief officer once said, hey, if I work a fire, I want to see the photos later because he was so busy, he didn't really get to see or experience what was going on. And he uses those pictures later as a way to kind of remember the experience. So you're getting this response, and this is interesting. So you're getting it's a way for people to share, people in the EMS community to share with others so they can look in and understand their experience. But you also mentioned wellness, and we know wellness has become in maybe the last decade or so, it's being elevated to something that the responder community is focusing on. And you were also at, weren't you at a conference where you were also hearing from people and promoting the book and sharing their reactions?
Yes, so there's several things there. Number one, first I want to say how true it is about what you've helped responders do across the board, illustrating it. I mean, you've illustrated people's careers in a lot of ways and given them keepsakes for when they retire, and help them learn and help others see it. And your contribution to emergency services is absolutely immeasurable. So thank you for that, number one. But also, you were talking about the experiences that paramedics have. And I just want to say again, these are experiences and thoughts and feelings and challenges that everyone across the entire emergency response spectrum have in common. We're all seeing the same things. We're all responding to the same people in the same situations. We have a slightly different role once we get there, but it's effectively all through these challenging times. Yes, wellness has taken on a big turn, a big acceleration in recent years. When I was first starting out, it was toughen up, suck it up, get over it. If you can't handle this, you don't belong in this business. That was the tone back 30, 40 years ago. Now there's a clear recognition that human beings weren't designed to see this level of distress in people over and over and over again over the span of decades in many cases. And it takes a toll. So that wellness, that community, those shared experiences, those being able to say, yeah, that was hard. Yeah, I teared up on that scene, or I had a difficult time handling that. And being able to talk about that is essential for responder wellness. So we have seen that uptick. I was recently in October at the EMS World Expo, where I had a booth sharing my book, and it was actually in the section called the Wellness Hub because it fits that so well. Come to find out, again, I didn't write it as a wellness book. I wouldn't have been qualified to do that. I just told the story without hiding behind looking tough. I told the story sharing my fears and concerns and worries. And that's what made this come through in this wellness mindset the way it has.
And so that's interesting because, and we'll do a little book plug here because I've read it. And it's and first off, you can write. I shouldn't be surprised because you have years as a PIO, but you're a natural. So praise, etc. We're not worthy. What is it like to be a paramedic and work in EMS? You can read this book and you're going to see a very comprehensive perspective. But continuing to talk about wellness, if someone is, let's say they're a little more closed off to peer connections and talking through how they feel about the stressors of the job, they can pick up this book by themselves and it's a safe conversation, if you will, because we're all human and somebody feels, hey, am I a bad person because I felt this way when I was on a call? I shouldn't feel that way. Does that mean I'm not suited to be a responder? And you are telling them in this book, hey, I had those feelings. They're part of the vocation. They're part of what we do.
First of all, I appreciate the kind words on the writing. That really means a lot because that's how I want to be able to communicate with people is through this platform. But yes, without a doubt, I think you put it really well when you say this is a safe conversation to take this book, go off on your own if you like, and read it and feel whatever you feel, think whatever you think. And maybe that loosens it up a little bit for you so that you can get to a point where you can talk about for a little bit. I would also say for peers who see someone who looks like they may be struggling with things, don't be afraid to go ask them, how you doing? Was that difficult? Have you ever seen anything like that before? And give them a crack the door open, a safe kind of, not real specific. Are you hurting right now? Are you struggling? None of that. Just soft questions that kind of open the door and give them a chance to say a word or two. May be very helpful for your peers who may be suffering.
You and I have an advantage because we are both of a certain age. I am not retired, but we are definitely in later decades of our lives. And that means we've been there, done that, and feel okay about this concept of we are human and we all have broken pieces. So the beauty of being of a certain age, you don't have to bundle in things like shame, guilt, and so on because you realize everybody feels these things. And for younger humans on the planet, much less members of the public safety community, that's a little bit of a climb to understand that, hey, everybody's got these things. Okay, so we can talk about wellness. We could talk about this for a half hour, but I want to keep us leaping all over the place. Let
Okay.
our listeners just jump back and forth. So the cover of this book implies the title implies the book is just for people in EMS. Did you write this with a broader audience in mind?
Absolutely. So the old saying, you can't judge a book by its cover. I guess I can lean on that. It certainly tells the topic at hand, but it is a broader audience because I think we've talked about it a bit. But when somebody is in distress, they call 911, and you have a variety of people responding. There's paramedics on an ambulance. There's firefighters on an engine. There's law enforcement in a police car. We're all coming to these same folks. And in doing the slightly different things to help make whatever is wrong a little bit better. If there is a child that has been injured or is very sick, if there is someone who's been shot or stabbed, if there's somebody having chest pain, if there's a car crash, all of these different things that happen that take their toll on the person that is the responder, there's no difference between a paramedic and a firefighter and a police officer in that regard. It's human beings facing, by definition of what we do, very difficult times that somebody's having. And the difference for all of us collectively, while most people are going to see something terrible at some point in their life, we're constantly exposed to these really, really difficult situations, and that takes its toll. One call at a time, sometimes, some calls more than others, but the cumulative effect is massive, regardless of what your uniform says on it, or what you bring to mitigate the circumstances, or what your vehicle looks like. The effect is the same for all of us. So this is truly a community book, an emergency responder community book. It's got the ambulance. It's got, hi, I'm a paramedic, because that's the platform from which I tell my story. That's where I saw all these things. But it's no different from all the other people who are in emergency services.
And another nice benefit of this book, another feature, is you also provide some of the nuts and bolts of how the EMS system works. Can you give us the short version of how you've seen the EMS system here in Wake County evolve? And from the perspective of Joe and Jane Sixpack, when they called 911, what did they see then versus what did they see now?
Sure. So police history is long. We kind of understand that. Fire history is long. We kind of understand that. EMS history is comparatively young, only coming about in the late 50s and 60s in its current form. So Wake County, like a lot of places at the time, there was Wake County EMS that effectively served the city of Raleigh. And then in the surrounding county area, including the other municipalities, there were 9 volunteer rescue squads, mostly intermediate level, largely EMT level, depending on how many calls went out at once, or what was happening. You could get an intermediate level ambulance or a basic level ambulance. Mid 80s, Wake County EMS went to the paramedic level a little later than a lot of parts of the country, but Wake County did it in the mid 80s. So the interesting thing is within Wake County, whether you got paramedic or EMT intermediate service, depending on where you were standing when you called 911, because the different agencies may bring different levels of care. That grew piece by piece in 1987. I think it was 3 of the volunteer rescue squads went to the paramedic level. And as things evolved over the course of the years, eventually everything was paramedic level, regardless of what agency was responding. And then ultimately, actually, I think just after I retired, it came to be that Wake County EMS was one single agency that covered the entire county. But quite a bit of evolution, quite a bit of difference in the level of pre-hospital care that people calling 911 received in 1985 versus 2021.
And you saw, boy, so again, people just going to have to bear with us. First off, Jeff is another history fan, and he and I have collaborated over the years to help document the history of rescue squads, EMS services here in Wake County. Let's give a plug for a page we both maintain. It's called History of EMS in Wake County, where boy, you did so much scanning. It's been years now, but I mean, hundreds of photos as you would collect them. As Jeff noted, over the last, say, decade and a half, those community rescue squads shifted, evolved, and through a number of different circumstances, ceased operation with Wake County EMS taking over their service areas, often hiring the members of those EMS agencies or squads, so that today Wake County EMS is the sole provider for emergency medical services in Wake County. Okay, where was I going with this? And
True.
so EMS, the evolution, and you got to see, for example, the introduction of the APP, and those crazy checkered cars. So tell us what the abbreviation stands for and talk a little bit about that expansion of the EMS system here.
Sure. So that launched in January 2009, APP Advanced Practice Paramedic. To simplify that, since then, and I'm not trying to give full credit to Wake County EMS. However, since then, there have been many similar programs across the country that have started that have more been known as community paramedics, borrowing the term from community policing, which kind of helped to make sense. So we know that many of the calls that we respond to on an ambulance, they don't necessarily need a paramedic ambulance. They don't necessarily need physician care in an emergency department. There are issues with access to healthcare for a variety of reasons, but it just is what it is. So as we respond, instead of continually sending an ambulance back to somebody that's got this recurring issue that could use a different type of intervention, we send now this separate vehicle, started as a Dodge Charger with the Battenberg pattern, made famous in Europe, the yellow and blue checkers. They would respond with the ambulance. If that person didn't need hospital transport, but needed a different type of service, the ambulance was returned to availability, and that advanced practice paramedic or APP would stay and work with them to connect them to the resource they need. Substance use, mental health counseling, different types of things like that they can make those connections. But they're also there as an additional experienced paramedic for a complex acute call where we may have a young paramedic and a basic EMT responding to a complicated medical call. We can also use that APP to put that experienced paramedic there and help them work through this complex set of protocols that
Jeff, are you there? Mission control to Jeff.
we're,
So there he is. I think
oh,
he's
hey,
coming
there we
back
go.
in.
All right.
So
When last I was babbling
we
about
had a
what I
little
was
we had a
saying.
little fun there, and Jeff was kind of finishing up what he was talking about the APP program. And one thing to note is the APP is also sometimes you'll hear them called as a single responder unit because they have a single responder aboard. And additionally to what he was describing for such things as community paramedicine, they are an extra set of hands. So when you have a high acuity incident, multi-patient incident, that's one more experienced set of hands. Another question for Jeff is, how did both patient confidentiality and peer confidentiality inform the writing of your book?
Great question. So let's look at peer confidentiality first. So for one thing, I didn't set out to have negative reflections on people. I didn't set out, nor should people set out for a memoir to air dirty laundry or settle scores. That's not what this was about. There was one situation that was a little bit sensitive, but being vague about who I was with kind of took care of that. From a patient confidentiality perspective, that was a long process because there were important stories that I wanted to tell and convey. And as I wrote through them, first of all, especially in earlier editions, I would realize as I went through that, that's a little bit more, it was high profile enough where you could kind of figure out who I'm talking about there. And so including my niece Audrey, she was one of the people that that read this long before it was published, a much longer version. And she told me about a couple of them where she took a call and went and searched it and said, "Ooh, that was this location on this date," and all this like, okay, I need to back my way out of this. That was a little bit too easy.
And let me throw in, you and I have talked about this in some other book related projects, either you and I have been involved in or have been aware of, that most of this is before HIPAA, the
Mhm.
electronic patient information protection rules, regulations, and laws. But as you've said to me before, hey, this occurred way in the past, but
Mhm.
yet we should retroactively apply the same standards of patient confidentiality and sensitivity.
Oh, without a doubt. I completely agree. And I by no means do I want to be sharing anybody's personal information. That's not what this is about. This is about the experience of the responder as they went to this thing. And so what I did is go back and take each one that could potentially be sensitive, and I watered down the details that would place and time it, and certainly identify the person involved, and still conveyed the story in a way that hopefully would have no negative impact whatsoever on the people involved, because that's not my intent at all.
It's interesting you mentioned the concept of dirty laundry. My ethos in what I do with my public safety storytelling, because I'm both a photographer who, as one chief officer in the fire department said to me, they loved what I do because I made fire department firefighters look like rock stars. And in one regard, that's kind of what I'm trying to doing. I'm trying to push the positive image of public safety, but I'm also a historian, which means I strive for truth. And sometimes that collides a little. My approach has always been you just tell the story. I don't need to add either editorial perspectives, I don't need to add emotions, I don't need to inflate, if you will, the emotions of what people who are having the worst, one of the worst days in their lives. I don't need to inflate that because it's sort of self-evident.
Without a doubt. And again, this book is about in a lot of ways, the impact on those responders. I didn't set out for it to be that. It's just how it turned out when I just told the story. And I have no interest in identifying people or calling out the people in particular that we're responding to. It's about us.
And let me throw in for a second, let me interject. Jeff, your book is not just what it looked like, the facts of what it looked like to be a paramedic, but it's what it felt like.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I wrote, it's not meant to be touchy-feely. It's just being honest about the emotions that people go through, whether we're covering it up or not. Everybody's having a lot of these same emotions. Some people just choose to hide it. I encourage people to kind of let it out a little bit, because you're much healthier that way. And let me add too that I didn't write this book to be about Jeffrey S. Hammerstein, because who am I? I'm just another person out there responding to calls. This book is about the shy little kid who wanted to be a paramedic and then became one and started responding to people's emergencies. That's what this book is about.
So as a public information officer, you're doing a great Joe Friday. It's just the facts, ma'am, and you're not embellishing, you're giving what's necessary. Did you feel any tension between a PIO role where you've got you've got a kind of a tight jacket on, and the sharing, or you might even call it oversharing, as we like to say today? How was that as you wrote? How was that tension inside you?
That in particular wasn't tension, because this wasn't about the technical side of EMS response. I included some technical things in there to explain to any lay people who may be reading, so they could have any idea what I was talking about. Like, you can't just say, well, we tubed this person. Well, what does that mean that you tubed this person if somebody's spouse is reading this? So I explained that.
Let me interject.
Sure.
When I say tension, what I really mean is, did you have to did you have to push through any barriers or any hesitancy of opening up about how you felt on calls as you were writing?
Uh, no. And I think that's just naturally who I was, because when I'm writing, it's like I'm in a conversation with this faceless, amorphous collection of people who are responders, and I'm telling them a story, and I'm doing it with just complete naked honesty. This is what I was thinking. This is what I was afraid of. This is how this impacted me. I'm just telling that story, because if I'm not being honest about it, if I'm trying to hide myself as I tell that story, then why do you care about reading it?
Was that process, did it come naturally, or did you surprise yourself at all with your ability to do that?
It was normal to me. I was surprised that the first couple of people who looked at this said, "Wow, you really let yourself be vulnerable in that." And they're saying, I mean that in a good way, because that's what engages readers. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm just putting down what happened. I'm just telling the story. So what I learned about myself is that I guess I'm entirely naturally completely open and vulnerable to it.
Do you think, or have you heard yet from readers or your reviewers, the family or friends, um, have any folks said, well, the person on the page is a bit different than the person I see or interact with in person?
Well, so I was acutely aware of that because when I talked about how important it is to take such and such a good approach to people and to crisis, every time I was very careful to add in and say, look, if you work with me, you know good and well I was this happy-go-lucky, perfect, interactive guy all the time. I was exhausted at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was short-tempered with people. I raised my voice here and there too. I can't pretend I was this perfect little angel because I wasn't, even though I talked about what I'd learned over the years, things like doesn't matter if it's an acute medical emergency where you do all these heroic things or not. Most of the time we're not. Most of the time they don't need urgent medical intervention. A lot of times they don't need any medical intervention. But I say things like you can still have a positive impact on somebody on just about every call you run, even if it's nothing more than treating that person like they mattered. It may be the first time that week or month that anybody's treating them with any dignity at all. And you got to have, I think you have to find value in that. Because if you're just looking to innovate somebody and be a hero all the time, this career is not going to go well. But if you can find fulfillment in being decent to people and helping them because they called 911 and they didn't know what to do next, and you got to be the one to help them. But then I would add in every time, it's not like I was this perfect person at that every time, but
Now, it, let me interrupt. What I think I was also asking, or more specifically asking, did the people that work with you, would they, when they read this book, do they go, oh, he was the type of person who shared and was that open when I worked with him? Or do you think the level of sharing, well, they'll be like, wow, he even has more to say than when I worked with him?
that's a fascinating angle. And first time I'm thinking about this. No, if we work together and you knew me well and you read this book, I think you will see much more openness in the book than you necessarily saw
All right.
on Shift, without a doubt.
Let me ask you this. It's a little side question. So Wake County EMS, I don't believe they have any more 24-hour shifts or trucks. It's been some years. Um, do you have a hot take on the interpersonal dynamic and the fellowship and relationships within the EMS system? Has that shifted because medics are no longer working and living together 24 hours at a time, but instead 12 or 8 hours?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's so many dynamics have changed, and they seem to evolve more and more year after year, or month after month. But yes, it's really a strange relationship in EMS on a 24-hour shift because these two people are placed together. They're typically not more, and I'm going way back now, they're typically not more than a few feet apart for 24 hours at a time, like you say. And we go through these challenging times together. We go through this mind-numbing monotony of things together. Then we eat together, and then we go to the bedroom and dress down and then wake up an hour and a half after falling asleep and we're together again. And it's a weird relationship. It's great when it gels and works, and a lot of times it does. But then, for example, maybe you get a part-timer because your partner took off for a shift, and now this person that you're meeting at 7:30 in the morning is who you're going to have in the truest sense of the word, this intimate relationship with for 24 hours. You've never met them, but everything about both of you is just locked in for 24 hours. So it's bizarre. I think that makes the 12-hour shift a little easier in that sense, because it's just this working. We're so busy. We're running through all these things. It's more of a job where we're getting the process done.
I have many perspectives and opinions. If you buy me a cold beverage, you can hear my hot takes on in private on the fireside. And if for our listeners, this is Jeff and I are really full public safety nerds. Jeff's son is a police officer. Jeff has been a police fan forever. You will see me giving just as much love to police, EMS, 911. For those that don't know, I was a Raleigh firefighter for 3.5 years. Way back when, I did about 8 months at the 911 center. So you and I will talk about, as we do when we have lunch, we talk about any aspect of the public safety profession. And when I think about 24-hour shifts on the fire side, and when I think about recruitment and retention, to be hired and work as a career firefighter means there's some overlapping circles in your Venn diagram. You've got to be able to wear a breathing mask, be in a claustrophobic environment. You have to have another ability to manage being in the presence of calamity, adrenaline, extreme circumstances. You have to have the physical ability. But a big one here is you've got to be able to work 24 hours in a fire station. And my metaphor is imagine every day at work is Thanksgiving with your family, where you're breaking bread, you're living with people who you know intimately, who may be very different in personality, views, culture, opinions. And I think that is one of the hidden pieces, at least on the fire side, for retention, is why do some people leave the career fire service is because living in that space is a challenge. End of thought.
So, in going back to my time on an ambulance, mostly in the 90s on those 24-hour shifts, it's such a valid point. So yeah, if I'm at, well, it's not called this anymore. If I'm at Station 3 on Six Forks Road, then yeah, it's just the two of us, and you both learn how to give each other space and how to interact when it's good and how to back off and give space when you need to. But then our EMS Station 1 downtown, where it's three ambulances and a supervisor and different people coming and going, you have that big room full of people and all this stuff going on. And particularly at the old station, we were in very small quarters, 201 West Martin Street, those very small quarters. Yeah, you can get at each other in those times. And I saw it happen plenty of times. But you also kind of learn how to be that person in that circumstance on a regular basis. One of the things I talk about in the book is, we're at work and we see this horror and this tragedy and these absolutely deplorable living conditions that people are in. And I don't mean that as an insult to them. I mean it as with feeling sorry to hear and see this. People where their floors are caving in, the roof is leaking, they don't have enough food, they've got rodents and bugs in the house. Those things are distressing to see. And but everybody says, well, that's the real world. That's what it is. That's the real world. And then I would leave that and come home where I was fortunate enough and blessed enough to have a secure house. It's clean, it's structurally sound. I've got food on the table. I've got a strong support network with my wife and kids. Is that not the real world? And just kind of examining that, they're both real worlds. We just toggle the switch and go to the other one and then toggle it back when we're coming back home from work. All point being is when you toggle it on to the work real world, part of that includes that every day is Thanksgiving with too many people in the house and there's carrying on and different opinions and yada, yada, yada. And you kind of learn to compensate and live with it.
So here's an interesting take. Here's another hot take for me. In I'm going to talk from the fire side, then you can contrast with the EMS side. So
Sure.
on the fire side, firefighters, you see in the course of that job going on calls, I call it unfiltered experiences. You are seeing every aspect, style, culture, way of speaking, presenting onto people, homes, unguarded moments, unclothed moments, vulnerable moments, and I call it unfiltered. And I think what that possibly causes, maybe influences, is when you're away from the call, firefighters at the station, they sort of feel like they feel empowered, or maybe it's compensation, maybe it's an adaptive reaction behavior that they become unfiltered with each other. What's it like on the EMS side?
So we're all the same. I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, yes.
Whether we're wearing a paramedic's uniform, a firefighter's uniform, a school teacher, an accountant, a banker, a construction worker, we're all the same. Human nature is remarkably consistent. It's just the location and the style and this, that, and the other, but it's essentially the same. So I talk about this early in the book, early coming to Wake County EMS, some of the struggles of that no holds barred talk and really struggling with it and just questioning for a little bit whether I could stay and then realizing I'm not leaving just because they're acting a certain way. I want to be a paramedic and this is the place to do it. Uh, so here's the bottom line to me. If you are gallows humor, venting, working through the struggles of all of this, if you're taking that approach about the individual behavior of somebody, of course, that's all fine and good. If we're slipping into we are putting all of this one demographic into a certain bucket and then talking about that bucket, to me, that's where we've lost. That's where we're both wrong and incorrect, and meaning that in two different ways there. So I think we have to keep that out of it. With politics, if you're making just off the charts political rhetoric and getting people wound up, that's got no place. If you have a somebody who wants to have a legitimate, intelligent discussion about policy and approach, even if you disagree, to me that's entirely acceptable. But it's different when you're saying, "Well, this candidate," rah, 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 rah. I don't think that has a place there. I
What
don't think
about
that
what
makes
about humor? How has humor helped or hindered over the course of what you observed in your career?
I think humor is just the application of those same venting the stressors. It's just another form of it.
A pressure valve.
Yeah, absolutely. Applying the same rules, and I don't make the rules. I'm giving my opinion. As long as the humor is about the behavior of an individual that we just spent time with, versus they're like this because they're list the demographics.
Right.
Those are two completely different things to me. And I was proud because one reviewer said the book is really, really funny. And so, in a lot of ways, where humor applies there, in very much the same way you're talking about that. So, I'm actually doing a presentation coming up in a few months where I'm trying to take the humorous angle, calling it the tragicomedy, the unintended tragicomedy of an EMS memoir.
So this is interesting. When I'm doing scene photography, one of the most interesting things I observe, and this is pretty much any given working fire, the work is done, crews are coming out, they've just finished the fire tack, overhaul might be starting, and there are smiles, there's laughter, there's handshakes, there's camaraderie, there's even, and this is the most interesting part, you'll get them on the tailboard and they're talking about, oh, well, we saw the smoke here. Oh, yeah, well, I was making entry here. And I'm going to call it the initial mitigation is a bonding. It's a comparing of experiences. It is smiles and laughter, which, of course, you and I, if we put on our PIO hat, you were one and I just play one on television, we think of the perspective of the property owner or citizens on the periphery watching and going, hold on, I'm over here and I'm almost in tears because this house was burning and the firefighters are there and they're laughing. What's up with that? And it's a fascinating duality. And I don't even know if there's a question in there, but that's my end of thought.
But it's an important topic and something we have to think about. So, number one, it is a good and true and legitimate form of bonding and releasing those stressors and having a comfortable moment where that tension of what we just did can come down, whether it's a structure fire or a cardiac arrest or a child hit by a car, whatever the thing is. It's a good and necessary thing to keep us well and the shared experiences, like you talked about, both from a wellness perspective and a little bit of a hot wash study on what we just did and learning from it. And we do have to be aware. It's hard, but we do have to be aware of public perception. Where I see that most often is when the TV camera is on. For example, I remember a trench rescue that was, well, it wasn't a rescue, it was a recovery. And there were a lot of units on scene, cameras showing, and we got a call from somebody saying, hey, you're on such and such a news channel. People can see you smiling and laughing to a group of us. So we heard it. Yeah, you're right, and we backed it down to make sure that we weren't coming across wrong. But I do mention in the book talking about that for the lay public. If you see this, don't mistake it as apathy or lack of concern, and kind of talk about the things that you just did.
So I guess we can drop at least one name. I'm going to talk about the great Tramp Dunn. He's talked about how he got interested in becoming a Raleigh firefighter, and one of the reasons he remembers, he was maybe driving by an emergency call, and he said, I saw these firemen, and there may have been an extrication. He remembers seeing them after they were done, high-fiving each other. And the whole experience from just doing the work to, it's almost a little bit of an excitement of, we got to do what we're trained to do. And he remembers seeing that and going, I think I want some of that.
That's legitimate. That's part of it. And think about the situation those guys were in moments before. It could be that they were in an incredibly tense situation where somebody's life was hanging in the balance, depending on how well they performed their job. It's not always like that. It's rare, but sometimes it is. And they may have just gotten through something where their pressure was high, their heart rate was high, their attention was acutely focused, and they did what they needed to do, and somebody directly benefited from that. So yeah, when you step back, you got to congratulate each other a little bit. It's easy to go to the sidelines of a basketball game or a football game or whatever, and it's a similar thing. The tension is that high. We did it, and let's congratulate each other. It's just that in sports, it's not typically as high as stakes. Well, maybe it is for some people. I don't know. It can get pretty overboard.
Let's talk more about you and your career. So I'm looking here, folks. He did slip me some answers to questions ahead of time, so I've got some fodder here. I'm going to just rattle off a few of the major incidents that you recall working. There was the ConAgra plant where they made Slim Jim products in Garner, 2009, an explosion. You were PIO on scene. You've been to the Glenwood Towers fire in 2018. There was a scaffolding collapse, a fatal incident in 2015. There was the EQ. This was a chemical fire in hazmat, huge incident in Apex in 2016. You were riding ambulance standby. You remember the 20 inches of snow in 2000. You remember responding the morning after Hurricane Fran. Any of these things spark any memories, anecdotes, or just the nature of major incidents in general you'd like to speak to?
Sure. So most of the first ones that you referred to, essentially anything in the mid 20 teens, most of that was from a PIO perspective that I was functioning in. And the truth is, when I wrote this book, I wrote way too much, including all of the PIO perspective, and I had to cut way back. So all of that is in a forthcoming sequel book.
Oh, giddy up.
But um, but I mean, there's so much to the PIO perspective. The first half of my career, anytime a news reporter showed up on a scene, whether it was a fire, a car crash, or whatever, I was a young responder then. From the leadership on the scene, there was an anger. Get those people back. Get them out of here. Back them up. Back them. Put them up yellow tape. Just this rage towards reporters, and I didn't ever really understand it, and I put a lot of thought into it. When I moved into a role about 2006 of being a PIO, I was thinking we shouldn't be running them off. We should be engaging them. We should be bringing them. We should be telling them to the extent that we can exactly what we're doing, and why we're doing it that way. If we have the resources, I don't mean to take resources away from from battling the thing to tell people about it, but if we have those resources, and the reason being is the most basic reason is this: they're coming to tell a story. Just like you were dispatched to this major scene as an emergency responder, they too, as a professional, were dispatched to this scene to do a job. They're coming back with a story one way or the other. And you can either tell the story, you can set the foundation for the information they give, or they're going to find somebody else to tell your story. And they're going to tell it any way that they see fit. And if you won't talk to them, then they're going to go with the most outlandish, watchable, attention-getting version of your story that they can get.
And to interject for our listeners and for full disclosure, Jeff and I did pair together to deliver a presentation. I believe it was either at an EMS or fire conference. It's been many
Fire.
years. And we
Mm-hmm.
did a presentation. I think the title was How to Tell Your Story.
Mm-hmm.
So if folks go to legeros.com/slides, we still have those slides. But we're talking about major incidents, and yeah, you do talk a lot about PIO stuff. But now, as you cast your mind back when you were just there, riding on the ambulance
Mm-hmm.
before PIO, talk about some of what you remember for those types of major incidents.
Well, one of the just amazing things to think about was the night of the 20-inch snow that came. I mean, it came very quickly. And yes, there are plenty of places that have way more snow than that and all that stuff. But it really stood out for us. You mentioned claustrophobia earlier. I felt a sense of claustrophobia during the wee hours of that night when we were I remember trying to go up Wade Avenue, and there's already 10 or 12 or 15 inches of snow, and there's so much snow we can't even see, and we're barely making it up that hill, and it's dark outside. And I felt enclosed and trapped and wondering how we were going to get through it. We made it to the top of the hill. I'm here today. But that was really a phenomenal night. I think the more probably impactful thing, of course, was when Hurricane Fran came through in 96, still at hurricane strength as it came through Wake County. And first of all, taking 2 or 3 times longer than usual to get to work because of having to reroute constantly for trees down. And the days, well, we were at a station with no power, as pre-generators. We learned not to use citronella candles for light inside the station. That's not very comfortable. But figuring out how to keep batteries charged, figuring out how to route to calls. And then the two things that really stand out for those next 3 or 4 days, we were constantly responding to bee stings and constantly responding to chainsaw accidents.
Huh.
That was just the story of the week because we were upsetting all these beehives with all the trees down, and that really took a toll too.
So I'm looking, I pulled up my notes, research notes on Hurricane Fran, which are based primarily on call data by Raleigh Fire Department Captain Pete Brock, who
Mhm.
later retired as assistant chief. Hey, Pete, during the 3-day period when Hurricane Fran came through, Raleigh Fire answered nearly 700 calls, 142 medical emergencies, 33 trees on building or people, 33 flooding, 163 electrical, power lines down. So if you're listening and you're not in North Carolina, we get hurricanes. Where Jeff grew up, where I grew up in Minnesota, they get tornadoes. West Coast, you get earthquakes. Here we get hurricanes. They are these slow moving disasters. You watch them for days. You see the map and they're just coming day by day. There's nothing you can do to change it. And you're watching the doom approach. Sometimes every now and then they'll make a sudden shift or they'll go somewhere you don't expect.
Mhm.
Last year, Hurricane Helene surprised everybody and it went right over to Western North Carolina. And I believe that's the worst disaster that struck that area in history. Here in Wake County, North Carolina, in September 1996, Hurricane Fran comes inland. What are we, 100 miles as the crow flies?
120-ish, give
So
or
we
take.
start getting rain 11 p.m. on a Thursday night. We get a tornado watch issued statewide. We get about 8.8 inches of rain over 24 hours here at the airport. That broke the 1929 record of 6.66 inches. We had wind gusts here as high as 79 miles an hour. I wake up in the morning, I get out right around. There are no traffic lights working within the city of Raleigh, none of the 420 traffic lights. There's damage across the entire county. It produced 3.5 million cubic yards of debris, killed 4 people. There were 24 people killed statewide. It did $2.3 billion of damage in the state. Now, this has turned into the Mike Legeros podcast. So go back and keep talking about what you remember.
Well, one that was a really kind of the thing that makes you go, ugh. There was one poor young man we responded to who was working a Bobcat, the little small loader. and he was going down to mid block and picking up what tree debris he could get and running it back to a dump truck at the intersection. And so they didn't have seat belts. They just had a restraint bar of sorts like a ride. So he was flying that thing as wide open as it would go, and he let the bucket down early, and that bucket caught a seam in the pavement and dead stopped at however many miles per hour he was going. So his chest went full sling straight into that bar. So I remember that. I don't remember any other details, but just to make you cringe for a second. The other thing that's kind of funny, Richard Myler was a longtime friend, worked at EMS in the Wake County Sheriff's Office, and my neighbor right across the street. Mentioned him quite a bit in the book. So he was a deputy doing traffic control while they cleaned up debris. And his patrol car was sitting there. He was directing traffic. And one of the gigantic loaders that you don't typically see was moving all this debris into dump trucks. And it turned and came and somehow let the bucket down right on top of that patrol car and crushed it. And when I got out, his blood pressure had dropped to almost nothing. And he was like, oh no, I just killed this cop's car. He's going to kill me. And Richard, this is who he is. He's like, dude, that's not my car. It's the county's car. It's okay. Don't worry about it. But there are all those little stories that come up. And yeah, like we were talking about earlier, you got to just kind of laugh at the stuff. Nobody was hurt, but you got to laugh and move on. We'll replace the car. It's okay. No
I
big deal.
have I have on my list of some of the pre-questions, what were some of the more smaller or most touching calls you recall? But I know that's a little of a red herring because folks can read the book. And let me ask you the higher level question. Tell me your thoughts on you are touching lives. I mean, the smallest interaction, the bee sting, you are touching lives. And what was it like to touch those lives for so many years and decades?
I think you have to realize that. And again, as we alluded to before, you have to find some fulfillment in that. It's an awesome privilege and honor to be the one. So we have people across the spectrum of emergency services who are enraged, openly, visibly enraged when people call 911 and they didn't think they should have called 911 for that. Yeah, we get it. I understand that. There are times where people shouldn't. There are better resources. But we got hired and paid to do a job to respond, the privilege to respond to the person who called 911 for help. So at whatever level, they've got something going on that they can't work through. Whether we think they ought to be able to work through it or not, they couldn't work through it. So there's a number that they can call, and we've told them to do that for decades, and we will come help you work through it. And so many of the times people are getting upset. You call an ambulance because your kid has a fever and you don't have any Tylenol. That's a waste of the system. It may be a waste, quote unquote, of the system, but here's the thing. Access to healthcare is very different for everybody across this nation. It is a nationwide healthcare problem. We're not going to fix it. You responding to that call and scolding them for that is not going to fix anything. All you're doing, number one, you're making them feel bad. You're not helping them. And number two, you're making your experience so much worse by living that rage. This shouldn't be happening. If you just let it go and sit back and say, all right, we're going to help you figure this out. And we're going to get you to the hospital or find another way to get Tylenol or find some solution. But still, I was the one that got to respond and call and be the one to help this person. And that will make you happier. That will make your career more fulfilling. But this is a perfect example also of where I have to say, it's not like I was a perfect angel every time. It's not like I didn't show impatience or whatever. But I have the wisdom of age and experience now to look back and say, this is where we got to be. So if I can teach that to anybody and help them be a more well-rounded, happier, more fulfilled responder, then it's worth talking about.
And, we can apply empathy because the person who says, I am spitting nails because they called for this lower or lowest acuity emergency. You can put the word emergency in quotes. They probably are. And you can put your hand on their shoulder and say, I understand you are feeling protective of the system and you are thinking of the other people who might have a need and our resource is not available.
It's a fair concern, but there's an easy answer to that. You can't fix it on an individual issue, on an
That's
individual
true. That's
unit,
true.
on an individual response. It's not for you to sort through, even at any level, in my opinion. That has to be figured out at a system level. That has to be figured out by research indicating how we can better apply what we have at a level so much beyond, so far beyond an individual person responding on an individual vehicle to an individual house. We can't fix it. So do the thing that suits that person best because that's the city or the county or the agency that hired you to do this said, this is what we need you to do. Will you please be paid to do this? So go do that thing. And if you've got ideas for what could make it better or more efficient, then get together with other smart people and develop some new approaches to things that makes it
You
better
All
between.
right, pop quiz time here, folks. Let's test our friend's memory. I'm going to say the name of the Wake County EMS agency. You tell me the color trucks they had. Wake County EMS.
Green and white. Well, see, I've already failed. Green and white up to about 2000, 2001, and then blue and yellow and white, yada, yada.
Garner Rescue.
Orange and white until a certain phase that would have been after the 2000s where they were dark blue and white.
But you're forgetting one brightly green colored vehicle.
Well, in my defense, technically by then it had turned into Garner EMS and Rescue Squad, two different tracks. So rescue was bright yellow, green, yellow, and the ambulances were still blue and white.
Fuquay Varina Rescue.
Orange and white.
Nightdale Rescue.
Orange and white until it was blue and white.
Beautiful, beautiful orange. Wendell Rescue, the OG.
Red and white.
So
And
you,
then, well, yeah, red and white until Eastern white, but that's you asked about windows.
Zebulon Rescue. What color?
High vis lime green and white.
Northern Wake Rescue and EMS.
Orange and white. Trying to remember if there was another iteration, but I don't think there was.
Six
Orange,
Forks Rescue.
orange and white.
Apex Rescue.
Orange and white.
Cary Rescue.
Orange and white.
There was the short-lived Holly Springs Fire Department EMS unit.
Well, okay. So there was, I'm trying to remember. One of them was black and red, like a red on a black body. And then another one was white with red and gray
And
or
there
silver
was a red
striping.
and green too, I think,
I'm trying
on
to
one of
remember.
them.
They typically incorporated some green in it to go along with that holly. Yeah.
Roseville.
Uh, Roseville was mostly red and white, but with a lot of blue in it and a lot of EKG in it, I want to say.
And Eastern Wake EMS.
Uh, Eastern Wake is a brought the red of Wendell and the blue of the others together, so it was primarily blue and red at that
And
point.
did I ask about Cary? Did I already ask Cary?
Yeah, yeah, carry orange and white.
Cary was, I think they were the first hearse tool in Wake
Oh, were
County.
they? I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised.
So let's go back to you and your history. So we're jumping all over, and folks, when you read the book, it is not 100% linear, sequential. Jeff does jump around a bit in his autobiography. Let's do another lightning round. You have a wife. How many children?
I have a wife and two children and one grandson.
One grandson. How long have you been married?
Um, 36 years and 4 months.
Since you've been married, how many different houses have you lived in?
One bedroom apartment, two bedroom apartment, and then the house that we're in. We're still in our starter home 33 years later.
You play music. How many bands have you been a part of?
Okay, that's a good question. All right, my brother's band in Indiana, ultimately named Stop the Car, got a pretty big regional following after I left. I'm trying not to take that personally. Then I started my own rock and roll band called 4 Day Break. It included Wake County deputies, other paramedics, and my brother-in-law Chuck, he was Clayton Rescue for a few years. Um, then, then we had a little band called Sudden Onset that had some other paramedics in it that we played at the North Carolina EMS conference for the entertainment that year. Had a blast with that. Well, then there's a bagpipe band, so I guess that makes four if you're
Oh,
counting
that's
bands.
right. So let's slide into pipes and drums. How many musical instruments do you play?
Well, zero. Uh,
How
I played.
many do you have the ability to play?
Okay. I play guitar, primarily electric guitar, and when I'm in practice, I can bang the heck out of that. Sorry, and have a lot of fun with that. Acoustic guitar, if you can play electric guitar, you can play acoustic guitar. Play bass some, and then I play bagpipes. I can keep a beat on a drum set if you don't judge me, but then that's about it.
What are the, give me the handful of rock songs that you are most proud of your ability to play.
That I'm so glad you asked that. My band, the band I was in with my brother and my band 4 Day Break were all original. So
All
I
right,
didn't
that
have to
yeah,
play
well,
other people's songs.
nobody's gonna know originals. So give me your top covers that you can play that you feel best about.
Uh, Very few.
Really?
Very few. I used the song Machine Head by Bush to teach my brother-in-law and Richard playing bass how to play their instruments.
What are the bands that are most analogous to the styles of rock music that you have, that your originals and your bands, what bands do they sound the most like or draw
Oh,
influence from?
so that's hard to. It was this was 98 to 2002 that we had this band. People, I mean, it's hard for you to say yourself. Like that's like asking, who do you think you look
All
like?
right,
And
let's
well, I don't know.
rephrase this. Who was on the highest of your rotation when you were listening to music at the time you were playing?
Oh, good heavens! So I think the best way to put it would be 90s rock radio.
90s rock radio.
Yeah, that would probably be the easiest way to put it.
Are you a podcast listener?
I don't listen to many. I started reading more, and I
Have
can't.
you heard of the 500 History of Rock Music and 500 Songs podcast by
No,
Andrew Hickey?
but I haven't. But I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to
So
try.
look this guy up. So it's going to take him 10 years. He does a one song per podcast with an extensive background in associated things, and he plays song clips. And it's going to take him 10 years to do it. And the podcast started maybe with 30, 40 minutes. And lately he might do 2 hours, like 2 hours on a song. But
Hmm.
it connects and it's the history of
Yeah.
the musician and genres. And it starts with, I think, a Benny Goodman song in the 40s. And I think he's going to end maybe in 1999. Okay, that's the end of the lightning round. Um, what kind of car do you drive?
I right now have a Chevy Equinox, and I absolutely adore it. I've driven giant pickup trucks plenty, and I had one that was a little bit later model, and it had an issue with the transmission. Then I had an issue with the something in the engine, and it was going to cost like $36 million to keep it running. And so I traded it in and got a little bitty small crossover, and I love. Now I need help getting things to the dump sometimes, but it's small, it rides nice, and I love it.
Oh, I have a crossover, my first, and I have a Honda CRV, and
Mhm.
what's your favorite type of automobile racing? I kind of know the answer.
Do you know the answer? You
I might
think?
know the answer.
It is unequivocally IndyCar racing, most specifically the Indianapolis 500. It is a passionate experience every time I go back to the
How
to
many times you
Indiana
been?
every year. I think this is my 34th.
I've never been
Uh,
to an automobile race. Although I was trying somebody was trying to see if they could get me on the field on the track side for a
mhm.
NASCAR race on Charlotte to shadow the fire people. And open invitation, folks.
Do it. It's
If you
fun. No no
you
offense to
get me
NASCAR.
you get
Oh,
me if you get me race side, you get me event side. I've shadowed EMS at Walnut Creek. You get me air side at an airport. If I have the free time, I will give you photo love. So little
okay.
shameless self promotion there. So I'm not a race car nerd. What do you have? And I don't even know what to ask. Do you have either a favorite driver or a favorite type of race car or some other favorite associated with Indy 500?
So I hopefully this is interesting enough answer. I very intentionally in the last 10 or 15 years have dialed back from it and tried to not let myself have a favorite driver or a favorite basketball team or a favorite football team because people get so wound up in sports that it becomes nothing but pain. I say to my kids all the time, sports is pain. The more invested you are in a team or a driver, the more opportunity you have to hurt. So I just love to sit there and watch 33 cars go by me at 240 miles per hour. That's what my favorite is.
All right, let's get into a little bit of shop talk. Why do people have to pay for an ambulance, but they don't have to pay for police and fire? Will that ever change?
Uh, if it changes, it'll be that people have to pay for police and fire. You- Um, I think there's a really easy answer, actually. When EMS started, again, late 50s, 60s, as it developed, it was just part of emergency services, and you didn't really see fees. This is part of providing emergency
Right,
services
right.
like you do. EMS, as it has evolved, EMS is now healthcare. It's still emergency services, but it is healthcare, and you pay for healthcare. And I think that's the bottom line.
That's a pretty good perspective. All right, I'm looking through our some of the earlier questions. Now, are there things you've jotted down or you've got queued in your brain that, ooh, I wanted to talk a little bit about this?
For me, the main takeaway that I want for your audience, which is heavily fire based, is to know that this book is about you too, despite the ambulance and the high I'm a paramedic on the cover. It's about all of us. And I guarantee you, any firefighter, any of the hundreds of thousands of firefighters, and I wish they would, um, I think any firefighter who read this would see themselves through most of the book. That's what I think. That's what I hope the takeaway could be.
Tell me about peers, people you know, the closer circles here locally or in the circles you travel. Are folks reading it? Are they picking it up? Are you getting surprised?
I I initially was very surprised because I got feedback from a lot of people that I've had some connection with, some that I know well, and some that I've had some connection with. I was surprised, and I'm trying to figure out how to be humble. They were incredibly complimentary about what they read, and more importantly, how helpful it's been to them. So that's been quite satisfying, and really pleased with it. Um, it's there aren't many mechanisms for feedback from people that you don't know. So it's difficult to gauge across different places that have got or different areas around the country what people's reactions are. I'm very happy with the book reviews on Amazon. I mean, I couldn't be happier with that. I was happy at the EMS convention last week when somebody from I don't know some state in the Midwest said, "Oh, I think I saw this." I was like, "Do you mind if I ask?" Where you saw, and she said it was a sponsored Facebook post. I was like, good, it's working. So very pleased with the response that I've gotten.
Let's talk about the craft of writing since I'm also a writer. So you said it took you how long to write this?
About 3.5 years.
And tell me about your writing process. Is there anything that you're doing longhand, or is it all on keyboard?
It's all on keyboard. To, to me, it's such a big difference from doing professional writing. So if I was at EMS and I sat down to write a 3-page submission for some thing that we were doing, it's very technical, correct, perfect grammar, speaking in terms that fit
Mm-hmm.
the
Yep,
thing.
yep.
It's all of that. With this, it was very intentionally as conversational as I could make it. There's a lot of things that somebody was helping me edit said that's not a complete sentence, that's bad grammar, all of these things. But that was writing in my speaking voice, and so I quite intentionally chose to keep those because it's conversational. If
Did you follow a schedule? Did you have a day of the week, hours of the day, etc.?
No, not necessarily. It does take a lot of time. So when I had time and can be in the right frame of mind, I would write and write and write and write.
In a given day? What's the longest you would be writing?
Yeah, probably 3 or 4 hours.
And did you write a first draft, second draft, third, or did you incrementally
It,
stop, revise, and so on?
I mean, it is as far as it's pretty messy in that sense. But I did sit down and write the story of that first morning, that first call, and then I went back in time to being that scared kid and then next moving to North Carolina and then going to school. So the chapters became sequential timeline wise at that point. However, within the chapters, I didn't hesitate to refer back to this other thing that happened many years
Did
before.
you write sequentially, or did you like write chapter 8 before you wrote chapter 4?
No, I definitely didn't do that. It
So
was
basically the book reads in the order you wrote it, if you will.
yes, yes,
Did you
absolutely.
did you have to pick up and reshuffle any notable segments of narrative?
Constantly. I edited over and over and over again, refining phrasing, making sure it was conversational and flowing. The readability and flow made sense. I did kind of learn I have a certain sentence structure that can be kind of complicated. And so I figured out I needed to go back and read this as a reader because when I'm editing, I'm going line by line. Did
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah. Fresh
structure?
eyes.
And then I came back and I read it the way a reader is reading, and I fixed a lot of flow stuff that way because the mind anticipates a certain sentence to be structured a certain way. And so I pay attention to that and go restructure that sentence to meet that flow.
Who was your first reviewer? Who were the first couple reviewers?
My very first was my sister Julie. So she's very well read, done tons of writing. And so I took that first chapter and she was anxious to be helpful. And I took it to her and she read through it and it was great because it was so marked up. She was mostly telling me to draw out more detail, take my time and let that idea develop, which was good in so many ways. And at the same time, it also encouraged me to write so much that I had to dial a lot back, but it was still very helpful. My brother Kenny read it. His daughter Audrey, my niece, read it all with feedback. There's another author. His name is Eric Jones. He wrote a book about my hometown called Wide Open Evansville. It was actually about how the police department in the 1920s apparently, allegedly, was involved in a whiskey ring. But he's been very helpful. He read it too and offered tons of feedback. So that's where the editing came from. By virtue of it being self-published, I wasn't subjected to corporate editors who would edit with the perspective of this being a moneymaker. This is not intended to be a moneymaker. It's intended to tell a story. So that's how I ended up where I'm at.
And how often did you have just chapters reviewed versus review the entire book?
I have to be painfully honest. I didn't do much of that. It was the three or four people
So your sister,
that
your
read the
sister
whole thing.
reviewed, your sister read the first chapter, or did she also get the whole thing?
She did not end up reviewing the whole thing. She was mostly the first chapter,
Okay.
and then the others read the whole thing.
So basically, you're sort of not real necessarily a proof of concept, but just so like, hey, here's where I'm headed.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so there was, without a doubt, a lot of anxiety on August 1st when I released this. Outside of people who are fairly close to me, are they being objective enough? And I felt like they were. But they also have a bias in favor of me. So when I released this, I was scared that this could just be this thing that makes no sense. It doesn't flow. It's not constructed. Uh, but again, with all the humility I was very reassured after just a few people outside of my inner core read it.
Did the perfection demon grab you at all? Did you face okay, it's time to let the child go forth into the world?
Without a doubt. The perfectionism was there the entire time. I mostly was sentence structure and phrasing and terminology. If I used a word, I Googled hundreds of words, making sure that was the exact appropriate use of that word, and I wasn't getting it confused with something. But then there comes a time where I realize I've been over this so many times.
Yep.
I can't see anything new. I want to actually make this thing happen, and so I threw the switch on publishing.
So I'm going to offer an analogy. So I play the drums and I've played live 3 times maybe. And I've noticed that I play differently when there's an audience.
Hmm.
And I know when I am creating art, creating writing, or posting that I can only take myself so far in the vacuum and I have to put something out there because the moment I know there are other eyes on it, I see and perceive things different than I expected.
Sure.
And I do. And this is, those of you that keep up with me on Facebook, and it's kind of true on the blog. If you see a posting come out, you might notice that there's 10% left to cook. And that is intentional because I know I need the feedback loop to start before I realize, oh, I don't even know what the remaining
Right,
10% is.
right.
Um, or sometimes it's 20%. Let me go back to the writing process. The book length. What was the book's length at its longest? Was there an even longer version at one point?
Oh, you're just making me anxious even thinking about this. So when I started the process, I searched how long should a memoir be? It said 60 to 70,000 words. A celebrity may be able to get away with 80,000 words. I mean, that was just one opinion. But when I was done, the longest, it was rough draft all the way through. It was 330,000 words. And so I went back first and made the writing more efficient, took out some redundancy, and I got it way down to like, I don't know, 318,000 words. And I thought, I have a big problem. So I went back and started taking out some storylines and some individual anecdotes. And I thought, yeah, I wanted to share that, but it's not that moving. I'm pulling it out. There was some there was some EMS process, operational, even quasi political issues that I had in there, and I thought, you know what? This is not the place for that. I pulled all that out. I got down closer to 150 and kept working through. Ultimately, as I recall, it's 128,000 words now. So
Did
it's
you
almost twice as long as a memoir is supposed to be. But that was part of my anxiety when it released, and I was reassured. I was reassured that it flowed well and was not too long.
what what'd you do with those cuts? Did you save them? Are they filed
Oh yeah.
away?
As I mentioned before, a lot of it had to do with administrative roles, including public information. So I make brief mention of some of those things in this book, but that will be a secondary book.
Jeff, let's do a little lightning round, a few more pop quiz questions. What are the three things you like to read about?
Sure, I like to read autobiographies and biographies and memoirs. I like to read nonfiction books about the Indianapolis 500. I'm not big into fiction because I like to read for historical fact and perspective on things that have happened in the nation and in the world.
Are there two, three biographies or memoirs that come to mind that you've lately enjoyed?
So, well, I'm going to start with a fiction one. I just said I didn't read fiction all that much, but I did just read Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. Fascinating book
Okay.
and a close look at well, a lot of different things. Um, I read one called Eddie Sachs, the Clown Prince of Racing, which he was a driver in the mid 50s at the Indianapolis 500 that died in a horrific crash, which many of the drivers of that era did. But quite a personality, an incredible personality. I'm going to add one more called We Will Rise, a true story of tragedy and resurrection in the American heartland. So I mentioned before, I grew up 2 blocks from the University of Evansville. In the 70s, we didn't have all these channels. We had 3 channels, and we had our local Evansville Purple Aces basketball team, a college basketball team going from Division II to Division I status that year. My family went. We knew all the players, their numbers, their positions, their playing styles. And then on December 13th, 1977, they took off from the Evansville airport to fly to Nashville to play a game against Middle Tennessee. And the plane crashed on takeoff, and all of the players were killed in that crash. And it was an absolutely devastating time for the entire city and certainly for us also. We moved away not long after that and never really had much closure on this devastating thing that happened to us. But in 2021, this book came out, We Will Rise, and it was the story of that of the team and the process for recruitment and moving to Division I, and then the story of the crash, the heartbreaking story of the crash, and that's what got me reading again recently.
Huh. Do you keep aware of the industry? I mean, how tuned in are you to EMS, public safety, and what's happening in the industry these days?
Uh, as more of a spectator thing, operationally, I would say. So the changes are massive. Clinically and operationally, I'm just kind of watching and taking it all in and being incredibly glad that I'm retired. Every story, everything I see, I appreciate my retirement. And I don't mean it in a negative way. I did my time. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But then when you're done, you're done. Um, But without a doubt, as this book has come out, I've gotten back in touch more with people and definitely have grown in interest in the entire wellness perspective of emergency services.
I guess we'll wrap things up. I'll close with, I'm going to steal a question from Tyler Cowen, the economist, whose podcast I love. What's next? What's the next thing that you're planning to do?
For me, I plan to finish putting together the sequel book that talks more about the administrative roles and functions and stories. I also plan to write a book about the Indianapolis 500 as a fan. And I actually have a storyline for a fiction novel that I'm going to work on. I'm going to keep it from being too long.
Huh. Well, thank you, Jeff, my friend. It has been a profound pleasure to know you all these years, to observe and see you turn into an author and hear the joy and the great satisfaction you're having of creating art that you're happy with. For our listeners, well, this wraps our first interview. We've never done this before, and hope you all enjoyed it. And thank you again.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.